Hi, it's Kylan, and since I don't really have a group, I just decided to present on the first before Stonewall readings. First, I'm going to talk about briefly the political climate and life for queer people in the 1950s and 60s. So, the Black Civil Rights Movement was going on, and it inspired some queer people to be bolder and braver, as it said in the Gay Revolution reading. Like Randy Wicker, and he was an early LGBTQ activist who was inspired by the Black Civil Rights Movement, of course, to start doing things for queer people like that after his lover got kicked out of university for being gay. Also, like Frank Kameny, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he saw MLK's march and he said, why aren't we gays having civil rights marches too? Which I thought was really so interesting. Although not much social change was occurring because the movement did lack a lot of outside support, like social support, even funds and resources. This was a time where queer people were really just finding their voices on a political level and starting to do things for the first time, like court cases and picketing and having marches and movements and stuff like that. The gay community faced a lot of discrimination during this time period as well. Things like being harassed by police and being wrongfully terminated from their jobs, like in the example of Frank Kameny. So now I'm going to cover the significant queer figures of the time that were referenced in the Stonewall Reader readings. First, Virginia Prince was a transgender and woman activist in this time period of the 1900s who wrote the magazine Transvestia. In the readings, there's an excerpt from The How and Why of Virginia, which is an essay from her magazine, which basically explores her gender identity, her journey being trans, and the effect that had on her life and intimate relationships, even discussing her multiple marriages and the juxtaposition of those. Audre Lorde is an author of feminist literature and was an LGBTQ activist in the 1970s and 80s and during this time period as well. She wrote Zammy, A New Spelling of My Name, which is a biomythography, which combines biography and fiction and myth, basically. So this is like pulling things from her real life and integrating it in a literary way. I actually read this book for a class I'm in right now. It's like an English class about sexuality and literature, and a biomythography is actually a genre completely specific and unique to Zammy and Audre Lorde. It is a really effective and genius way to tell a narrative through fiction, so get you attached to a character and like have the story and plot go as you need, and add those literary elements to boost it up while also making it completely realistic and realistic fiction. Very powerful and tells an amazing story. So this story really follows a black lesbian in the 1950s in New York City, similar to Audre Lorde. And last but not least, John Rechy. He's a Mexican-American writer. He wrote a lot about sex workers, gay men, and transgender people since the 60s. He was also arrested in the 1959 Cooper Do Nuts riots in LA, which was a big event preceding the Stonewall riots. The excerpt in the Stonewall Readers was an excerpt from his work City of Night, which is an autobiographical novel about like basically life in NYC. It talked about him going to a library and his interactions with other young men and gay men. I think an autobiography is also a powerful way to tell a story. It's more like how the facts and the plot of your life tell a story and how that affects the readers instead of using literary elements and language like a biomythography and like character development and stuff like that. So now I'm going to talk about how their works and the stories told in their works tell the story of queer people at the time and some themes about that. So first I'm going to discuss gender identity. Transgender people like Virginia Prince were heavily stigmatized as having psychiatric issues or just labeled as homosexual because these professionals lacked any terms for that. In her essay, she says, "Inevitably, I fell in love and eventually married. The day before the event, I burned or disposed of all of my clothes under the happy misapprehension that marriage would end all this silly stuff. No, marriage didn't cure me." I found the "no, marriage didn't cure me" sentence really powerful, especially given her history with being accused of having psychological problems. The reason why she said all this too was that she thought that now that she had a girl, she wouldn't want to be feminine or be like a girl anymore, which really emphasizes the importance that gender identity and sexuality are related but are completely separate things. During this time, genderqueer people were having to explore their gender identity behind closed doors as it was social taboo. So Virginia Prince says, "As I got older, I got bolder." And I thought that was a good callback to um, homosexual people were learning to be bold and brave as well, as it said in the gay revolution. And by that, she really just meant she was going out and like she was doing and performing her gender more intentionally and with more purpose. Not that you have to do trans to be trans. That's kind of like something I learned in a book called Detransition Baby. It's a really good trans literature piece, but it's more like it helps genderqueer people feel like they look on the outside like they feel on the inside. And as a non-binary person, I definitely relate to that. So at the time, Virginia Prince specifically was having to make up stories to buy women's clothes and heels, as she was talking about, and then like sneak around to wear them because she wasn't allowed to like outwardly portray herself, or so she felt because of societal pressures. As for the social sphere, this is a time where queer people were trying to find a sense of belonging and acceptance, and this is a theme that resonates across queer literature throughout the times. Virginia Prince, in her first marriage, her wife was not very like aware or accepting of her gender identity, and their divorce even ended in some huge legal drama and bad things for her. But in her second marriage, her wife was understanding and accepting, and she commented about that, saying that she finds that now that she can be accepted by her wife, she's also learned to completely accept herself, and as a girl, she's interested in feminine relaxation and comfort as her wife is. And I thought that was just so powerful because it shows that humans really are social beings, and even though we shouldn't rely on others' acceptance to feel better about ourselves, it really is important for us and our mental well-being to build that community and that sense of belonging. Audre Lorde even comments on this, talking about the diversity in the queer community and how they were trying to come together. She says, "However imperfectly, we tried to build a community of sorts where we could, at the very least, survive within a world we correctly perceived to be hostile to us." And I think that was really powerful because in a society where queerness with gender and sexuality was seen as bad and wrong, um, they could still try to find community within themselves. As for intersectionality, though, both LGBTQ plus people and people of color were being oppressed on many levels at this time, and thus being a queer person of color had its own unique barriers and still does today. As for Audre Lorde, a black lesbian, the question of acceptance had a different weight for her than it did for white lesbians. This is something that her character said in Zammy, but it also rings true for her. At the time where both LGBT people and people of color were not accepted, for a black lesbian, people had to accept not only that you're lesbian, but that she was black as well. And that was something that was really difficult for people at the time for some reason. Racism within the gay community was also a factor, and it made it hard for queer people of color like Audre Lorde to find their sense of belonging in their own community, even among their multiple communities where they didn't feel accepted in either for their intersectional identities. There was a scene in Zammy where the main character was facing some discrimination at a gay space when they were out with their friends, and she commented, "And we would all rather die than have to discuss the fact that it was because I was black, since, of course, gay people weren't racist. After all, didn't they know what it was like to be oppressed?" And I felt like this rhetorical question just had so much power and was very effective in portraying how discrimination within your own community can make it hard to find that sense of belonging, and even when it wasn't acknowledged. So on that, I wanted to play this short clip, maybe 30, 40 seconds, of an interview with Audre Lorde reflecting back on this time. I just thought it was really relevant to what I was just talking about.
Everyone knew everybody else, but as I said in Zombie, a lot of the times we were finding ourselves in bed with the same white women, right? and it was always a very kind of touchy thing. Like you recognized each other, but you didn't hang too close. So there was not the kind of, but always there was the need and the recognition, but there was not the kind of even connection that we have today, that we see today.
So, to wrap it up, the last thing I want to talk about is sex culture. So, finding the sense of community was also difficult for gay men, um, as many queer relationships at the time were defined as sex because of the need to hide one's sexuality and gayness. Not just for gay men, but all queer people. Um, in John Rechy's work, as he was talking about the queer bars in the area, he said, most of those bars attracted large numbers of young men who went there to meet others like themselves for mutual, night-long, unpaid sex sharing. The bars made me nervous then, and largely I avoided them. And it kind of goes to show in the stories these are telling, whether looking for friendship, like camaraderie, or even romantic intimacy, like something deeper than just physical intimacy and sex, it was difficult to wade through in a time where you weren't allowed to love proudly and be openly gay. So, yeah, that's really all I have to cover. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thanks so much for watching. Here's my works cited. And yeah, thanks, bye.